Hi, I'm Rudy. You may have seen me around before on my other channel where I make PMVs, animations, and stuff like that. This is going to be my first longer form, more commentary based video, and I'm going to be discussing Moonpaw, a protagonist from the upcoming Warrior Cats arc Changing Skies. Since she was first announced, Moonpaw has taken the fandom by storm, discussions surrounding her evolving in very surprising ways, both good and bad. Before I get into that though, I'd like to warn anyone listening that this video will contain discussions of incest, ableism, and harmful misconceptions of intersexuality. If any of these are distressing to you, you can check the description for timestamps with which you can skip around the topics. I'm going to be going through this in sections, basically progressing in the same order as things have in real life. Starting with the first two sentences we ever got about Moonpaw, the initial reception, and everything that came about through it, then moving on to the more recent canon information and the secondary reception, as well as the controversy that has quickly grown around her. I'm also going to be playing a video of my design process for Moonpaw in the background and discussing it occasionally in small breaks throughout. The version I start out with is pretty far from the final design and mostly tests out basic ideas I had for her. On May 15th, 2024, an article was posted on the Warrior Cats official website announcing the Changing Skies Book 1 cover, title, and blurb. According to this article, humans have started construction on clan territory, poisoning the stream and negatively affecting Sky Clan in particular. Of the three POV characters of the first book, one will be Leaf Star, who is losing her vision and struggling to maintain authority over her clan while they start to doubt her ability to lead, and the second will be Tawny Pelt, who is trying without success to convince her son and others that the Moonpool is in danger from the construction. The third protagonist, and the only one that really matters for this video, is Moonpaw. I'm going to quote her two sentences exactly, because you need to know this is literally all we had for people to start building off. The article reads, "In the midst of the chaos, Moonpaw, an apprentice struggling to understand the mysterious voice in her head, thinks that she might be having visions, but the voice becomes increasingly sinister, and Moonpaw wonders if it's a sign of darkness on the horizon." Immediately, people latched onto those two sentences, fan art and theories sprouting up by day one as she quickly gained popularity. An immediately popular theory was that she would be a kit of Nightheart and Sunbeam due to their recent relevance and the combination of their names seeming to fit it perfectly. The mysterious voice in her head was also theorized upon, with the most obvious, but also possibly most boring options, being another dark forest cat such as Mapleshade, Curlfeather, or Splashtail, assuming he dies in this current arc. While I do love Curlfeather in particular of these options, we've gone down this route way too many times before for it to be fully enjoyable. It's also been mentioned that it could just be StarClan, but in a less conventional way than usual, like how Goosefeather received his prophecies. I've thought of the possibility that the voice itself is not sinister because it's evil or dangerous, but rather speaking of things that are, and it may have just been worded unintentionally weird or purposefully ambiguous. Other than that, there's also the theory that Moonpaw has some sort of relation to Soul. Whether he's the one haunting her, she's related to him in some way, or maybe is a reincarnation of him. I think it could be relevant for Soul to show up again, considering he's a well-loved character who never really got a satisfying end to his story, and Leafstar, a character he's strongly connected to, is a POV character this arc. We didn't have any information on Moonpaw's appearance at this time, but the general expectation was that she would be another gray cat, due to her name, as well as the long line of gray protagonists we've been having in previous books. Though expected, this was a more dreaded outcome, and many people took to designing her in more colorful and unique ways. Much of the fandom really expected her to be very similar to previous protagonists because of this, as well as her being mentioned as having visions, which could easily have left her as insecure gray medicine cat being manipulated by a mysterious evil force, the 12th. Things started to get a lot more complex very quickly, however, when Tumblr user Skinwretch, also known as Widdock, I hope, feel free to strike me down if I've mispronounced that, posted their take on the character's future arc. In this post, posted the same day as the original blurb, Widdock said she wants Moonpaw to have a deep connection to the Moonpool, not in the spiritual way medicine cats before her have, but as if it is another living being. In this hypothetical, Moonpaw discovers the Moonpool can speak, but nobody else ever hears or tries to listen to it over StarClan's chatter. It forms a deep connection with Moonpaw to the point where Moonpaw feels its pain when it ends up poisoned, a callback to the implications of the human construction in the blurb. Widdock expands on the idea soon after, describing a plotline in which Moonpaw, following in the paw steps of many female protagonists before her, has a crush on a boy facetiously named Jakeyfer, whom she is sad about being rejected by. As she develops his connection with the Moonpool, however, she becomes increasingly less focused on this boy, as well as noticeably more chipper but distant in the eyes of the rest of the clan, developing what are considered to be strange behaviors and spending more time out of camp. Sometime in the next book, in this hypothetical situation, Jakeyfer approached her himself, claiming to have changed his mind. Moonpaw, however, is at this point entirely uninterested. When Jiggyfer asks her why, she tells him that she's interested in someone else now, the Moonpaw being the only thing on her mind. I've definitely removed a lot of the descriptive factors from this recounting for the sake of simplicity here, so I do recommend checking out the original post if you're at all interested, which is much more elegantly written. Despite this post only having a little over 400 notes at the time of me writing the script, the idea very quickly spread throughout the fandom, a huge amount of fan art and stories being made around the idea and further building upon the premise in all sorts of ways. Many of these posts received thousands more likes than the original, spreading the concept even further. This phenomenon was originally why I wanted to make this video. The way the fandom so fully latched onto this idea and built upon it both individually and as a collective, despite knowing the character would likely be very dissimilar to this premise it created once she was fully revealed. Moonpaw, as she was in these couple weeks with no more than 2 sentences to her canon character, would likely end up quickly overwritten and nearly forgotten once her canon story came out. But right now she was loved. She was fondly crafted and shared by a collective, and she was infinitely nuanced because everyone had their own way of adding to her. She's in a loving relationship with the Moonpool, and the Moonpool takes the form of her reflection so they can go on little dates, and the Moonpool is dying. Or the Moonpool is poisoned and only Moonpaw can help her. And she ends up drinking the poisoned Moonpool. Maybe she dies with it. Maybe she dies saving it. Maybe it haunts her. Maybe it created her. She's Soul's daughter who joined the clans, or Nightheart and Sunbeams, or maybe she was a kitty pet. And she could have any of 1,000 different designs. Some people even theorize that she could be an animal that isn't even a cat. There's actually a map for this version of Moonpaw currently in the works, purposefully left very open and with no set design. I think it's a beautiful celebration of this group creation, and I hope it creates a lasting memory of her long after the 9th arc comes out. On May 30th, 2024, we received our next bit of canon Moonpaw information, this time much more substantial. With this article, her design was confirmed, as well as more about her character, which I'll read out now. Our first young POV character to appear in Changing Skies is Moonpaw. Moon is an unusual name for warrior cats, but in Moonpaw's case, it reflects how special her parents, Bayshine and Thriftier, think she is. A cat who, due to a rare genetic quirk, has different colored fur on each side of her face, divided by a nearly straight line. As Moonpaw recalls in Book 1 of Changing Skies, her father, Bayshine, thought that his lovely daughter's face resembled a half moon, and when she was a kit, Moonpaw's unusual appearance brought unusual expectations. Many in ThunderClan imagined that she might be destined to become a medicine cat, or that her unique face might be a sign from StarClan. Readers will find that Moonpaw's wants are not all that different from other apprentices. She wants to figure out who she is and to serve her clan, but in Moonpaw's case, what other cats think about her may have more of an impact on her future than her own goals. Moonpaw's clanmates may be right that her unusual face indicates a cat who is destined to bring great change to the clans, but will Moonpaw choose the right path? Through both the blurb and her graphic, Moonpaw's parents are confirmed to be Thriftier and Bayshine. You probably already know that there's a lot both her parentage and design entail, but I'll get more into that in the controversy segment of this video. Despite being the cause for some debate, Moonpaw's design immediately sprung excitement within the fandom. Not only was she not yet another plain gray cat, she was given a very unique and quickly recognizable trait from the start, which is not something we often get, and she's the first cat in the series to canonically have heterochromia, with 1 green eye and 1 yellow eye, not to mention her claimed chimerism leading to numerous unique design opportunities. In some ways, however, she does end up seeming more generic through this as well. She's another ThunderClan cat whose main motivation is to serve her clan. She's got heavy expectations placed upon her by her peers, and is expected to be a medicine cat because of her perceived connection to StarClan. All this we've seen before, but hopefully the writing team will be able to twist it in a new direction for the actual books. With Moonpaw being supposedly a chimera cat, some people have suggested the voice she is hearing could be the quote-unquote twin she merged with in utero, or at least otherwise some part of herself, something to do with duality, anything that's not some dark forest or StarClan cat. While I would love to see something more unique and think this could be an interesting idea, it could also become very ableist very quickly, if not handled in an extremely careful and respectful manner. It would be far too easy for a topic like this to foster negative misconceptions of people with dissociative disorders or those who experience psychosis for any reason. As I said, I could see this being an interesting storyline, but probably not from the Warrior Cats writing team, who I do not trust to handle such a thing properly, especially with the blatant mistakes they've already made in this arc alone. I know I said I'd leave some bits for the controversy segment, but I'm going to go over it here briefly before delving into the heavier side of things in more detail in the following section. Currently, one of the most well-known things about Moonpaw is that her parents, Thriftier and Bayshine, are first cousins. I don't want to go too deep into it on its own, as I'm sure many people already have and will, but I'll put a graphic up on the screen here showing just how intertwined their family tree is. This is not the first time the writing team have made a mistake like this, but is perhaps particularly egregious considering these cats have never been shown having any sort of relationship, and we just went through an arc in which a solution was created that could have curbed the issue of inbreeding within the clan significantly. Instead, they chose some of the worst possible cats to ever have kids together. People have already gone over what a disaster it would be for any of Ivypool and Fernsong's kits, who already have this mistake in their family tree, to ever have kits of their own within ThunderClan. Perhaps the writing team believed that because their target audience probably won't ever realize how related these cats are, they don't have to worry about it. But there were just so many opportunities now in particular to not do this. That being said, it's possible the reason they had these two cats in particular as Moonpaw's parents is due to their popularity. Bayshine was a consistent character throughout Astartes clan, and Thriftier, while not really doing much on her own, is the sister of the incredibly popular POV character Bristlefrost, who sacrificed herself and saved the clans just 2 arcs ago, as well as the daughter of the perhaps even more popular character Ivypool, who just became a deputy in the last arc. If this relevance is written into the story, for example, if the great accomplishments of these cats she's related to affect Moonpaw's motivations and her peers' expectations for her, it would probably be pretty hard to write out at this point. Maybe by changing her father to a cat other than Bayshine it could help, but he may be relevant as well, as it's theorized that because Moonpaw is said to remember him in the past tense in her second article, he may end up dying during her kithood. But then again, who says we couldn't just kill off a different cat? If her parents end up entirely irrelevant, however, they may be able to change it by the time the book is released. It's not as if they've never edited a book due to negative feedback before, even after publication. The ableist comment said by Sandstorm about Briarlight and Squirrelflight's Hope, for example, caused the book to be reprinted back then. Despite the amount of love Moonpaw has received, she's also garnered a lot of really unexpected controversy since she was first announced. A lot of this happened while I was in the process of making this video, so it seemed like my controversy segment just kept getting bigger and bigger. This marks the beginning of said segment, by the way, so please be aware that this will be getting pretty heavy and potentially uncomfortable at points. I'm going to start us off with what was initially the biggest source of debate surrounding her, that being her chimerism, or at least what was labeled as chimerism by the official Warrior Cats website. The debate at its core is based mostly around whether the writing team actually knows what a chimera is, and subsequently, whether Moonpaw truly is one. Technically, what the writing team said chimera was is incorrect. While a cat with a split color and pattern across the face is possible with chimerism, it's not at all uncommon with normal tortoiseshell cats, and the idea that it always indicates a chimera cat, or that that's all it is a common misconception. However, while I don't think it's at all unlikely that the writing team would make a mistake like this, I could easily see them unintentionally miswording it, or simply trying to keep it as simple and understandable as possible for the younger kids they expect to be reading these articles. It's still misinformation in that case, which isn't great, but they usually keep these articles pretty short and simple, and considering the amount of typos and such I see going forever unfixed, I don't think they put a huge amount of effort into them. Either way, I've seen people on both sides of this debate taking it way too far, harshly insulting others for simply believing Moonpaw is or is not a chimera, or acting as if one or the other is morally wrong or a personal insult. I don't think it really matters that much, certainly not enough to be a cause for hostility. It's taken to much more concerning lengths, however, when the debate leads to the spreading of actually harmful misconceptions. On June 3rd, Tumblr user Bonefall received an anonymous ask claiming the flippant way the writers were treating the subject of chimerism was problematic because chimerism is, according to the Xanon, a disability that can cause issues in every species, including humans. However, while it is true that humans can be and often are chimeras, the claim that it is a disability is harmful and regressive to current movements working to move away from that idea. In order to really understand a subject and why these ideas can be harmful, I wanted to go over what chimerism actually is. I'll do my best to keep things simple and comprehensive, but I will link some resources I'm getting my information from in the description in case any of you would like to delve deeper into the subject on your own. There are a few different types of chimerism, but only one is really relevant to this discussion, the one Moonpaw has if she is indeed a chimera. This is called fusion chimerism, and it happens when two zygotes merge in utero. A zygote is the set of cells that is formed immediately after the egg cell is fertilized, but before it can be classified as an embryo. Once merged, the zygote grows as normal into an individual human, or cat in this case, despite containing multiple sets of genetically distinct cells. Fusion chimerism is actually a lot more common than one might expect, and maybe far more common than we even know, since cases very often go completely undetected for the individual's entire life, usually only being identified through blood tests or in cases where there are visual external differences. In humans, these can show up as differently colored patches of skin, heterochromia, or unique sexual characteristics, or they can result in no visual differences at all. With cats like Moonpaw, these features can be a lot more obvious, as they can show up through fur color, patterns, length, and texture as well. Of course, they could just as easily still look like any other cat. It is extremely rare for fusion chimerism to lead to health issues, and it is certainly not inherently a disability. Where this topic becomes more relevant is in cases where the two zygotes that merge are of the opposite sex. The resulting individual may have varying degrees of differences in sexual characteristics. People who belong to this subsection of fusion chimeras are also intersex. Most chimeras aren't intersex, and most intersex people aren't chimeras, but this overlap is still notable and important to discuss. One of the biggest issues intersex people face are nonconsensual, usually entirely cosmetic surgeries they are very commonly subjected to at a very young age in order to alter their bodies to something some doctors and parents believe better fit the societal norm. There are cases where surgeries at a young age are necessary for the immediate health of the child, but the vast majority of operations done on intersex individuals are completely unnecessary and could have easily waited until the individual was able to give their informed consent, rather than causing lasting trauma and often further complications down the road in what would otherwise be a finely functioning body. Implying intersexuality as a disability can be incredibly harmful, while the intersex community is already trying so hard to push back against the stigma that sort of thinking creates. This particular situation was one brought about through ignorance rather than any sort of malice, with the Anon later apologizing and admitting to having misunderstood what chimerism really was. But I think the fact that it happened once in such a public setting suggests the possibility of this view being held by others less publicly, people who aren't as intertwined with the Tumblr area of the fandom this took place in, and thus still may believe that line of thinking. I think by spreading this sort of knowledge where it's relevant, such as in this video essay, we may be able to prevent situations like this in the future, especially ones where the misinformation is not so quickly shut down. On a lighter note, the revelation of Moonpaw's chimerism means she could very easily be intersex herself, even if the authors don't explicitly mention or intend it. Many intersex people, along with others in the fandom, have fully adopted and celebrated this idea, and I personally hope it becomes something that's widely accepted as part of her character moving forward. Don't let your guard down just yet, though, because we're only halfway through the controversy segment at this point. I originally didn't plan to linger too long on the incest situation the latest article has brought to the surface, because it's already probably the most well-known thing about Moonpaw besides her design, and the light joking way everyone was treating it with had me feeling a bit uncomfortable. A few days into writing this video, however, it became a much larger issue that was very publicly addressed, at least within the Tumblr side of the fandom. While most did not go so far as the examples I'm going to list, there were a disturbing amount of people mocking Moonpaw for her lineage and the implications of it in a genuinely very hateful and careless way, wishing for her death of related complications, joking about her being mentally and physically impaired, referring to her with the R slur, and thoughtlessly comparing her to real victims of incestuous abuse and people with congenital abnormalities. There is such a lack of forethought here that it actually is at points sickening to see. You have to understand when you say these things that there are real people who exist who end up at the butt of your jokes. There's real trauma inherently connected with the subject that people all too easily overlook. The fictional cats you're joking about won't see your posts or comments, obviously, but the real people who are affected by these situations will. And many have already come forward stating how uncomfortable it makes them to see. But these type of jokes are so normalized that they feel they have little choice but to just try and ignore it. I don't believe anyone is purposefully trying to be malicious, but you have to think about the effect that you have and what your words imply at all times. It's easy to see someone making a joke and joke along with it, or take it a little farther. It's easy to make fun of something you don't understand. It's easy to take something as bad at face value and then handle it improperly because you didn't take time to think about why it's bad. I know a lot of people in the Warrior Cats fandom were very young and think things they say are harmless or only affect fictional cats. But we have to encourage being conscious of our words and the harm they can carry. Making fun of people born with features considered abnormal or undesirable is wrong. Applying morality to features people are born with is wrong. Applying a morality to someone for what their parents did is wrong. I'm not saying you should harass anyone over this. I believe you should generally assume ignorance over malice unless confirmed otherwise, and you should aim to educate over harassing as long as the person is open to learning. People make mistakes, and while they should never be ignored, they should be allowed to learn from them as long as no harm was ever intended. I hope something can be learned from this video in that way. This video ended up being a lot longer and more complex than I intended when I went into it originally, but I hope it was enjoyable to watch. I really like the idea of people being able to look back at this video in the future and know exactly what was happening in the fandom at this time. This is a big thing for me, being my first time really putting myself out there in such a tangible way. I always used to think I'd start out with a voice changer. I'll likely be making more talking videos in the future, but otherwise you can find me on my main channel at Rudimentary. Tumblr at Rudimentary but spelled slightly differently, or my Warrior Cats Tumblr at Ploverpaw, where I talk more about the things I'm working on and whatnot. There will also be some links in the description for articles and such I used as research for this video, and a link to rain.org for anybody who may be struggling with the heavy discussion of incestuous abuse that is going around at the moment. Also, please don't hesitate to let me know if I handled any of these subjects improperly or said anything incorrect. I am fallible as anyone else, and I am more than willing to closely consider any feedback I receive. Bye.